Well, Yasser Louati is a French human rights and civil liberties activist. He joins us now live from Paris. Thanks so much for speaking to us. First, I do want to get your take on the security issues that France and nations in West Africa are facing. How important is cooperation with France on the ground in fighting terrorism and extremism?
Now, we have to review the vocabulary being used, madam. First, it is not a collaboration between Western African countries and France. It is France implementing its own foreign agenda on the African soil and then demanding that the local governments back its positions wherever they are located. First, Emmanuel Macron complained about the fact that the anti-French sentiment has risen. Well, when you look at the multiple crimes committed by the French army locally, some hostages were killed, if you remember, in 2017 during a French intervention. And people now are making a correlation between what happened in the last century when France would bring a civilization to Africa, and today France is bringing security. France is not bringing any security to anyone. It's only securing its strongholds in Western Africa in the global competition between with China, with Israel, with the US, and for example, even South Korea, to name a few. So now Emmanuel Macron, even the way he's addressing Western African leaders, he summoned them to come and show up for an advanced G5 Sahel summit about this rising anti-French sentiment and to demand further cooperation on their behalf. The French military is highly unpopular in France. And you mentioned it, and I thank you for that, that the currency called franc CFA, which was named the French African colony currency, is about to be rebranded, but the roots of this post-colonial currency will not be changed. Western African countries will be required to still keep 50% of their reserves in France. The currency will still be printed in France, and France will still have a say because the French CFA, and the new brand of ECO will still be pegged to the euro. Knowing the fundamental problems with the euro we have here, I don't think France is bringing any stability in terms of security, let alone about economic development.
Okay, yeah, so I mean, is that true? Because I have been hearing from some sources in Senegal that the plan is to break entirely with the West African franc and launch an independent currency so that the Senegalese economy in particular can have the flexibility it feels it needs to better stimulate economic growth and drop what many, including yourself, feel is the colonial legacy of France weighing down its former colonies.
Well, we can, of course, speak about the official discourse, and we can also check the track record of France. Who is to believe that France will give up 50% of the reserves of African nations on its soil? Who thinks that France is going to give up on the fact that the currency will be printed in France, in Clermont-Ferrand, in the central part of France? Well, we are grown enough to stop being naive about this discourse. But now, if we talk about the economic legacy of France, yes, how about we break from the French CFA, and those countries can decide on their own if they want economic integration or common fiscal policies, if they want to open a free market at the regional level, at the same time stop being pegged to a Western currency, especially the euro, which has already taken economic sovereignty from France. So how about African countries which the currency is pegged on an already problematic currency?
Okay, now, but I mean, France is quick to remind you that that currency is still stronger than any alternative. You know, Macron has said France is not master, but rather a guarantor of a currency that effectively provides stability to West African and Central African nations. Do you believe to no extent is that true?
I mean, like, what is Emmanuel Macron talking about? I mean, like, have we seen? I mean, like, if the currency was installed in 1945, right as France was losing its colonies, it still implemented this new currency. So we have no window to judge if those African nations would be better off without the French CFA. So it's like creating a precedent and telling countries which had no other alternative, well, this alternative is the only one you have because you Africans are unable to decide on your own which currency should be adopted and which monetary policies should be followed. We have to be. No, Emmanuel Macron is not stupid. He may think we are, but fundamentally, the currency is problematic. As long as France has a say in what is stability according to French standards, I mean, like, if you look at the situation in France and the disaster of the euro, the Brexit being talked about, the Grexit, etc., I don't think France today has any moral authority or political authority to come and tell Western African nations, this is what you should do.
Okay.
How about we let the Western countries decide on their monetary policies, and then France says, okay, we acknowledge, and then so long.
Okay, I think a number of people would take issue with you saying that the euro is a disaster in a sense, and actually many would argue that it is a very stable currency, one of the world's leading currencies, and can provide a level of economic stability to certain countries. But let me ask you this. I mean, when you say that since 1945 and this currency has been in place, there is no alternative to compare it to. So let me ask you this. In the context of West Africa, when we look at the economic powerhouse that is Nigeria, for example, do these former French colonies look at a country like Nigeria with envy, saying it's because of their economic independence with their own currency being the naira that they've been able to grow and invest in their own in a way that maybe other West African nations haven't?
I cannot speak for African inhabitants of the sub-Saharan countries, but what I can say is this. First, we have regimes in the Western African countries that unless I'm wrong with my history lessons, are not based on a popular vote. Many of them rely on either a foreign intervention or at least French political support, if not other countries. That's already problematic. Many of the governments we speak about in West Africa have not been elected. We can speak, for example, about Mali, which is like a striking example, a president that nobody has elected. Now, Nigeria can, of course, act as an example because with all the problems we have in Nigeria, there is still a path to be followed, at least in terms of having stable institutions, stable currencies, and at least a powerhouse that can give an example to Western African nations. So far, France is still the order giver for that part of the continent. And of course, this will not change, given now that we have foreign powers coming into Africa, looking for resources and etc., etc. For example, it's not a how can I say, a coincidence that many of the strategic sectors of the Western African economies are held by either French owned companies or at least French businessmen, Bolloré, for example, being one of them.
Right.
Yes,
Yasser, we're going to have to leave it there. I'd like to thank you so much for joining us with your analysis there from Paris.